speak again this morning. I appreciate that. Let's just pray. Lord, let the words of my mouth, the meditation of our hearts together be acceptable in your sight, for you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I'm going to read from John chapter 13, verses 1 to 10, and then 36 to 38. The picture on the front of the bulletin captures the story. You may have noticed it, the washing of the disciples' feet. So John chapter 13, verses 1 to 10. Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it in the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. During supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer garment, tied a towel around him, then poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Well, unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not only my feet, but also my hands and my head." And Jesus said to him, "The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." And then down to verse 36. Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, where are you going?" And Jesus answered him, "Where I am going you cannot follow me now, but you will follow me afterward." Peter said to him, "Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." And Jesus answered, "Will you lay down your life for me? Very truly I tell you, before the cock crows you will have denied me 3 times. I want to begin by first saying that I think Peter, the disciple of Jesus, gets a bad rap. By that I mean, I think he's often remembered as someone who got things wrong, as someone who was the first to speak and then he said the wrong thing. The examples we have in the story, plus here's another example. Remember how Jesus said early when he got to know Peter, "Throw your net on the other side of the boat?" And Peter said, "We fished all night, caught nothing." Basically saying to Jesus, we'd be wasting our time. And then we remember Peter on the Mount of Transfiguration saying, "Let's build 3 temples." And the voice of God basically saying to Peter, "Never mind that, Peter. This is my son. Listen to him." Peter didn't catch the meaning of what was going on and opened his mouth to make it clear he had it wrong. Well, the 2 stories I just read from John's Gospel are also ones in which Peter gets it wrong, and it would seem to be proof Peter had the tendency to miss the point of what Jesus was saying or doing. But this morning I want to take another look at Peter and see what he got right. What I'm suggesting we do this morning is get a different picture in our mind of Peter so that we look for what is there and what is right about Peter's thoughts and actions. So these questions will frame what we're talking about today. What is it about Peter that makes him the one to speak before the other disciples do? Secondly, why does he make the boldest statements and seem to take the boldest actions of any of the disciples? And thirdly, that'll lead us to, what did Peter get right? Well, as I just said, the 2 stories that I read seem to confirm our suspicion that Peter got it wrong, and so let's talk about that first one. It takes place when Jesus and the disciples have gathered together to celebrate the Passover meal. It would be the final time for Jesus to do this, And the Gospel of John includes 5 descriptive and powerful chapters about all that happened that evening, chapters 13 to 17. But here in the beginning of that section, in the opening verses of chapter 13, the Gospel of John makes it clear about what Jesus knows and what he's aware of as he sits down to eat this meal with the disciples that day in Jerusalem. So this is the context for the foot washing. Firstly, he knew that his hour had come, meaning that he knew he was to depart from this world and go to the Father. He knew his death was just ahead of him. He could feel it, he could sense it. He also knew that he had done his work of loving those who were his disciples, which I assume means the 12, but perhaps others who were closest to him. Thirdly, he knew that the devil had already put in Judas's heart to betray him. And finally, he knew that God the Father had given all things into his hands, that he had come from God and he was going to God. So aware of all these things, Jesus would appear to have a heavy heart, and it's made even more difficult, I would think, because his own disciples don't know all that he knows. They couldn't, of course. And it would be then a lonely and difficult time for him. But with these thoughts in his heart, Jesus does something unusual, something that normally a servant would do in that country. He deliberately got up from the table, took off his outer robe, tied a towel around his waist, poured water in the basin, and knelt down in front of the disciples and began to wash their feet. This is not an unusual activity in that dusty climate. People did a lot of walking, of course, and good hospitality included the washing of the feet of your guests. But like I said, normally a servant would do this. So Peter was watching all this, and there was something about what Jesus was doing didn't sit right with him. Peter had this specific view of Jesus as his teacher and master, which he was. He had already correctly identified Jesus as the Messiah. You might recall that story, the chosen one of God. And in Peter's mind, the Messiah should not be washing the feet of the disciples. Something was wrong with this picture for Peter. So when Jesus came to Peter to wash his feet, Peter objected. He said, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" It's a question, but what Peter really was saying is, "Don't wash my feet." And then he adds, "You'll never do it. You'll never wash my feet." Well, this sounds like a good answer, because really the master shouldn't be washing or shouldn't be doing something that a lowly and humble servant normally does. If anything, it should be the other way around. The disciples should be washing the feet of Jesus. But Jesus explains to Peter, he says, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." And then Peter responds, "Well, then wash all of me." And we want to laugh exactly at Peter's response. It's so childlike, completely. He has changed his mind. But why? Why did Peter change his response? I think it's easy to pass it off as, he's too quick to speak, too slow to listen. But there's something, I think, worth thinking about in this response. Because surely the other disciples saw that there was something wrong with the teacher washing the feet of the disciples. They too would have seen that it should be turned around. The followers should be washing the master's feet. But none of them said anything, except Peter. Why? What does this say about Peter? What is it about him that makes him speak up when others stay silent? Well, it seems to me that Peter is often so intent on doing the right thing, about things being as they should be, that he can't keep quiet about what he sees as wrong. He had this idea, and I think it was a common idea, that there was a need for proper respect of the person who was your master, your teacher, your rabbi. In other aspects of Jesus' life, Peter had a strong view as to what the Messiah was to do as well. You might recall that he had already objected to Jesus saying he was going to suffer and die. In Peter's mind, that's not what the Messiah had come to do. The Messiah had come to be lifted up, honored, served, and to serve. Well, so there's something good about what Peter wishes to have happen. Honoring Jesus is a good thing. Wanting Jesus to have a position of prominence is also a good thing. There's no evil intention on Peter's part. He means well, and he has the deepest of respect and love for Jesus. His intention is, in fact, very good. So, in summary, it's all wrong, Peter says. You'll never wash my feet. And when Jesus explains, he says, unless I wash you, you have no part of me. Well, in that case, wash all of me. There's the story. So Peter has realized that what Jesus was offering was a gift. It was a blessing straight from his heart. Peter realized he had it wrong. He also realized that the blessing that Jesus was offering was what he wanted above all else. He was quite willing to admit he was wrong and to ask Jesus for that blessing. We might chide, and I guess I've done that too, about Peter saying, "Don't wash my feet." But let's think about this. Are we ready to say, "Lord, I want everything you have to give me"? Are we, or am I, willing to have Jesus wash my heart, make me pure and holy, or am I a little too proud to ask for that? It's one thing to pay respect and honor to the Lord. It's one thing to sing our praises to him, that's what we should, and to acknowledge him and how great and holy he is. It's a different thing, though, to humbly and openly ask him to wash us, to make us clean. I chose to include one other short story about Peter that's written later in this chapter. The story seems to come toward the end of that evening, and after Judas had left, and after Jesus had offered them the bread and wine and given them a new meaning. Jesus now talks about leaving, and it's not clear whether he means literally leaving that upstairs room where they've been having the Passover meal, or leaving the world. Maybe both. Because it's not long after this that Jesus and the 11 disciples go to the Garden of Gethsemane, and then Jesus is arrested, and the steps to the crucifixion become clear. So Peter hears Jesus saying that he was leaving, and he asks, "Where are you going?" Jesus says, "Where I'm going, you cannot follow." "Lord, why can't I follow you?" What is behind this question of Peter? Why does he want to follow? Why not just let Jesus go? Well, it seems to me that once again Peter shows his heart. He wants to be with Jesus. He wants all he can of Jesus. He wants to participate in all that is there to experience of Jesus. No sitting back. No letting things slide with Peter when it comes to his relationship. He sticks out his neck to ask, "Why? Why not? And I will lay down my life for you. I really mean that." Well, we know what happens. And Peter's comment, again, looks a little foolish to us because he can't do it. Peter will soon pretend he doesn't know Jesus and deny him forcefully 3 times. Peter couldn't keep that commitment that he wanted to keep. He got things wrong, it would seem. But again, I want us to think about the intention of Peter, the desire in his heart, and his utter commitment to be faithful and supportive and loyal to Jesus. Yes, of course, he couldn't follow through to the degree that he wanted to, but you can't fault him for his desire or his intention. And if you think he didn't really mean it, you forget how bitterly Peter wept when he realized that he had blown it and had denied Jesus 3 times. Peter fully intended to follow Jesus. He fully intended to stand by him in his darkest hour, and he fully intended to be counted as one who was faithful to the end. Of course he failed. But this morning I want us to think more about that intention than the failure, to think about the heart and the focus of Peter. So we have two stories. This one is similar to the story about the foot washing, where Peter intended to do the right thing, to say the right thing. And when he realized he'd said the wrong thing, he refused to have Jesus wash his feet. He changed his mind and wanted Jesus to wash all of him. Then when he realized he had denied Jesus after emphatically saying he would not do that, he went out to weep. Two stories then in which we see the heart of Peter and see what he got right. I think both can alert us to our responses to Jesus. Let's review them. Peter denied Jesus, then felt awful and wept. And when we fail to keep our promise, to affirm our love for Jesus, does it bother us? Peter insisted that Jesus not wash his feet, then changed his mind and wanted Jesus to wash all of him. Well, today Jesus is not here in the flesh to literally wash our feet, but he is here to wash us from our sin, selfishness, self-righteousness, but only if we actually and with total honesty invite him to do so. I think we're probably careful not to object like Peter did, but are we then careful to respond as Peter did and say, wash all of me, Jesus, wash all of me. Amen.